Hi everyone, here is your video for this week 2 due on 9/12, where you'll have a quiz on this video as well. So here we go. So first of all, some vocabulary review. We've got, right, so see if you can test yourself here. Torah Sheba'al Peh, which means conversational Torah or oral Torah. Torah Shebichtav, written Torah. Rashi is the acronym for Rabbi Shlomo ben Yitzchaki. See how they got the name? See there's the Ra, there's the Sh, and there's the Yi. Rabbi Shlomo ben Yitzchaki. Okay, Mishnah is oral Torah written down. Shisha Sidrei Mishnah is the 6 books of the Mishnah. Masechet is a tractate or subdivision of the Mishnah. Sorry about that. Parsha, section of the Torah that we read each week. Tameh, impure. Tahor, pure. Agadah, the story or fable or non-legal part of the Talmud. Halacha, Jewish law. Bat Kol, voice of God. Kushia, difficulty or problem. Teirut, solution. Ona'ah bidvarim, deception with words, using words that you withhold or that you offer, and they by using them or withholding them, they create kind of a relationship imbalance. Lo b'shamayim hi, it is not in heaven. All right, so trying to try it one more time, going through it. Torah Sheba'al Peh, Torah Shebichtav, Rashi, Mishnah, Shisha Sidrei Mishnah, Masechet, Parsha, Tameh, Tahor, Agadah, Halacha, Bat Kol, Kushia, Teirutz, Ona'ah bidvarim, Lo b'shamayim hi. Right. So here we are. We are at our very last lines of the sugya here, right? Sugya is kind of like the story, the sugya. Okay, and here we go. We're going to, there's the sugya up there, and here are the words, right? So we're up to, what do these words mean? Lo b'shamayim hi. Rabbi Yirmiyah said it means the Torah was already given at Mount Sinai, and we do not listen to a bat kol because it was already written in the Torah from Mount Sinai. Lean after the majority. And I think Omer brought up in class, oh, lean. I just saw something else leaning. That leaning was actually the walls of the Beit Midrash. So Rabbi Natan found Elijah and said to him, what was Hashem doing at that moment? And I think this is, first of all, this is interesting, meaning that if we stop the story, like what I'm going to ask you to do in a second is I'm going to ask you to write the diary of God, write God's diary kind of about this day, because basically, in a sense, that is what Rabbi Natan is asking of Elijah. What was God thinking? What was God thinking at this moment? And the question is, why does Rabbi Natan need to ask that question? It must be at this point kind of ambiguous what God might be thinking. So I want you to think about for a second, right? What might be the possible ideas that God could kind of, how God could react to this moment when Rabbi Yirmiyah gets up and says, right, or not Rabbi Yirmiyah, but Rabbi Yoshua gets up and says, Lo b'shamayim hi, right? Of course, we have Rabbi Yirmiyah's idea of what what he thinks Rabbi Yoshua is saying, but we don't have God's reaction. So what could possibly be God's reaction, right? God could be probably, oh, this is the worst thing ever. I can't believe I just took it upon myself to show you miracle, 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 and then I kind of took it upon myself to actually talk, which I don't like to do that often. Like it was something like this mini revelation moment, and then you're totally like disregarding me. So Rabbi Natan comes in and says, right, and says, "Hey Elijah, by the way, why Elijah?" Right. So tradition has it Elijah never ever dies. Elijah basically gets kind of transported up to heaven in a golden chariot. Elisha sees this happen, and Elisha realizes that that Elisha takes over. Elisha was Elijah's prodigy, but Elisha realizes, oh, Elijah is now up there with God. So we invite actually Elijah back over and over again, to kind of visit us, because Elijah is kind of the Jewish prophet that never dies. So he's kind of continually invited. So he's like around God's house and hanging out with God and kind of knows what's going on. So that's why Elijah is the one who's taught. who's the one who's asking this, who's kind of the one that Rabbi Natan asks. But I guess Elijah also kind of walks through the world as well. So they're talking. What was Hashem doing at the moment? And Elijah says to him, at that moment when Rabbi Yoshua says, Lo b'shamayim he, God was smiling and says, Nitzchuni banai, Nitzchuni banai, my children have defeated me, my children have defeated me. So the question is, what does that actually mean? What does it mean, my children have defeated me? Why is God smiling at this moment? And I spent a year during rabbinical school. I worked in Germany, and I distinctly remember the rabbi that I worked with also talked about this passage as well, because as I told you, it's probably the most famous passage in all of the Talmud. And he made the following comment. He said, the word netzach, sure, it means prevail or glorify or win, but we also use the word to netzach to mean eternal. When we say netzach nitzachim, we say forever and ever, forever and ever. And so he said, actually, what Rabbi Elijah is saying is God is smiling and saying, my children have made me netzach, have made me eternal. Why is that? Why do you think that is the case here? All right. So I want you to do this exercise in your red books, and I'll ask for some people to share their answers to this question of write a small version of like God reflecting upon the day of the Tanur of Shalach. Write what God would have kind of written in God's diary about kind of what happened on this day, what God's kind of involvement was, and what God's reaction is. I'd love to. We're going to go around and share that during the thing. Okay. Now I'm going to complicate things a little bit, and I'm using kind of some. I'm using this book. Let me see if I can find it back here. This book called Intertextuality and the. Let's see if we can find it here. Intertextuality. Where is it? 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 Oh, wait, okay. I'm not finding it right now. So it's called. The book is by Daniel Boyarin, and so I'm just going to complicate things for a second because I want to look closely at the words "lo bashamayim he." What does that mean? And so first of all, I want you to think about what does it mean in the context of the sugya that we just read. When Rabbi Yoshua stands up and says "lo bashamayim he," what is he saying about law? What is he saying about God, and what are they saying about who kind of owns the law, and how did the words "it's not in heaven" kind of are used as Rabbi Yoshua's idea that the Torah is with us, the Torah is not with God. Okay, so now we're going to complicate this and just show how radical these words "lo b'shamayim he" are. Why is that? Well, let's look for a second about where these words "lo b'shamayim he" come from. Well, they happen to come from the Torah portion that was the parsha that was read this past Shabbat. This past Shabbat, if you were in shul, the two parshiot that were read were Nitzavim and Vayelech. We're right at the end of the Torah. That's because Rosh Hashanah is coming. And in Nitzavim, the words Lo b'shamayim he are said. They're said, obviously, the entire fifth book of the Torah is Moshe's speech to the Jewish people right before they entered into the Promised Land. And Moshe uses these words, Lo bashamayim he. So let's see where they come from. And what I'd like you to do is, I'd like you to read over these over the context of this. So stop the video, read this over, and I want you to tell me, I want you to write down what you think this Lo bashamayim he it means in the context of how Moshe is saying it. When Moshe says the words Lo bashamayim he, it is not in heaven, right? It is not in heaven. What is actually the meaning of that? And then what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to compare how you think that Rabbi Yoshua is using this word Lo b'shamayim he, and compare it with actually how it is being used in this in the context. I'm going to give you the answer in a second, but I want you to kind of think about it first and see if you can figure that out. Okay. Okay, so welcome back. So I hope you've kind of looked at how Rabbi Yeshua uses the words Lo b'shamayim he, and how this sentence how Moshe uses it. Moshe says, "It's not in heaven that one should say, 'Who will arise to heaven and take it and make it heard for me to do?' It's not over the sea that one might say, 'Who will cross the sea to the other side and take it from us and make us hear it that we might do it?' But rather, this thing is very close to you in your heart and mouth. Do it to do it." What is Moshe worried about? Moshe is worried about the people, the Israelites are going to be lazy, lazy, lazy. And they're going to say, "Oh, the Torah is so far away from us. The Torah is so incomprehensible. The Torah is so difficult to understand." And so Moshe is trying to make it very, very clear that the Torah is accessible. The Torah is theirs to take. The Torah is theirs to understand. Don't be lazy. The Torah is there to grab and to use and to hold. Okay? But so what does Rabbi Yoshua do? And and Daniel Boyarin in intertextuality and the reading of the Mishnah says Rabbi Yoshua transforms the verse through his citation into meaning that the Torah is beyond reach. Right? So look at this again. Right? Moshe is saying the Torah it's not in heaven, meaning the Torah is not beyond reach to you. All right? And so Daniel Boyarin says, yes, Rabbi Yeshua transforms the verse through his citation into meaning the Torah is beyond reach, not from us. The Torah is close to us, but it is beyond reach from God. Now, it never says in this verse the Torah is far from God, or that God is not close to the Torah. The Torah, this verse says, "Hey guys, the Torah is close to God, but you can get it too. You can also have Torah." Whereas Rabbi Yoshua says it's either one or the other. There's a binary here. Either God has it or we have it. Once we have it, God is no longer involved in the process of what Torah is. This is crazy, right? But that's what Boyarin picks up, that it's a very radical reading of this verse. So it's not just that Rabbi Yoshua says a verse that says God but out, but he's actually using Torah and interpreting the meaning of Torah to show that the rabbis have the power of interpretation. Right? He's using interpretation. He's interpreting to show that rabbis have the power to interpret. It's crazy. So here's my next question. But if the voice of heaven can't control interpretation, right? If that's completely in the hands of the rabbis, then doesn't that just mean that everyone can do whatever they want? And we brought this up in class, and this is where we're going to study that the Talmudic piece that I handed out, but we're not going to actually get to it right away because I want to do something specifically a Talmud piece about Rosh Hashanah, since Rosh Hashanah is coming. But we're going to get to this other question of like, wait a second, now the rabbis have the power. Does that mean it is unbridled, unlimited power? Is it anarchy? And I think some of us gave a little bit of an answer to that question as well. But okay. And I also want you to look at one other thing here. Oh, that shouldn't come yet. I want you to look at the verse that was used also when Rabbi Yirmiyah kind of explains the meaning of Lo B'Shamayim Hi. It says it means the Torah was already given at Mount Sinai, and we do not listen to a bat kol because it was already written in the Torah from Mount Sinai. Lean after the majority. So just like we saw in Lo B'Shamayim Hi, there was kind of a reading in a pretty radical way of what that actually means, right? When it's taken out of context. Rabbi Boyarin is also going to tell us that the words Acharei Rabim Lintot are also, if we look at the entire verse, is also kind of a pretty radical reading. Although I would say that this reading comes from an earlier source as well, but that's kind of besides the point. So, what does this phrase mean? Lo tiye acharei rabim, you will not be after the majority, lit ra'ot, for evil. Velo ta'aneh al riv lintot acharei rabim lintot. So it means something like this: you will not go after we're talking about a court case here. Don't go after the majority to do bad. Like if the majority are going to say something, are doing something that is wrong, you cannot pervert justice in that way, right? And then it says lo ta'aneh al riv lintot acharei rabim lahatot. you can't afflict someone, taneh, regarding who's about an argument, to go after the majority, basically to lean after the majority. And this comes in the context of like, what should a court do to be an honest court? Meaning, it shouldn't a court an honest court is not a court that actually, according to the Torah, that believes in affirmative action. Meaning, just because you're rich, the court shouldn't say, oh, that person who's rich is right, or just because someone who's poor, the Torah says in right around this Shemot 23:2, just because the Torah says, you should not, just because someone is poor, you shouldn't decide the case on them because of their circumstance or something like that. You have to administer justice in a just way, not looking at the circumstances around their upbringing, who they are, but the case itself. But what is the Torah saying here? Well, there are times when the majority is doing something that is not good, and we should actually try hard to avoid. Sometimes the majority will take us to an unjust place, right? So we need to be really, really careful not to go after the majority when we think that someone is going to be oppressed, or someone is going to be, or evil is going to be done and not evil. That sometimes the individual lone voice of justice needs to be listened to, and we need to be an upstander in that case. That's what this is saying. But all of a sudden, the rabbis are interpreting this, are taking the words acharei rabim lintot. And by the way, they're also and they're looking at the words after the majority inclined, because it's weird. These words feel a little bit superfluous, a little bit of an added word. You will not be after the majority for evil. You will not afflict someone concerning an argument to incline, right? You should not afflict someone by inclining concerning an argument, by inclining towards the majority. But we've already kind of said that right here. Then it says after the majority to incline. So what are these extra words? The rabbis are saying this basically. They're saying there should actually be a full stop right here, a period, and then just the words after the majority to incline, right? Meaning that's like a general principle, after the majority incline. But actually, this phrase is saying something very different. It's saying be wary when the majority is saying something that's not the right thing to say. And they're saying, no, actually, this phrase is telling us about how a court of law should always move, that the majority is always right. So just like the Lo B'Shamayim He, this is also a radical kind of interpreting of the verse itself. And so what does Boyarin say? He says, paradoxically, I'm sorry, this is not Boyarin. This is Jeffrey Rubenstein says, paradoxically, the Torah grants the sages the authority to reject God's intentions so as to render decisions according to a normal, standard legal process. Again, the Torah grants the sages the authority to reject God's intentions so as to render decisions according to a normal, standard legal process. Again, that's hard to understand, but basically it's saying the rabbis interpreted what these words acharei rabim lintot. They took it out of the context that it was written, which probably meant be careful of majorities that are doing something for evil. The real thing that we always need to think about is asking, is justice being done? Is oppression being minimized? And even if the majority says, do it, oppress, make justice not happen, you have to say, no, 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 we should not be doing that. That's evil, that's wrong, and we should stand up against that. They take those words out, acharei rabim lintot, after the majority lintot, and saying, that's how our legal process is supposed to work, and you wrote that in the Torah, right? God could have said what? God could say, I didn't write that in the Torah. That's completely out of my context. And by the way, now we're talking about, I didn't write that the way you're understanding Lo B'Shamayim He is not the way I understand Lo B'Shamayim He either. You're taking these words from the Torah, you're kind of figuring out what they mean, and the way that you're using them, the way that you're saying to use them out of context is giving you power, you rabbis power. That's exactly what's happening in our case. Oh my goodness. So completely radical. Completely radical. Right, and right. So it turns out, and Rubenstein says, it turns out that the sages have interpreted this verse to give themselves the authority to interpret verses, right? It's not that there's somewhere in the Torah that says, by the way, the sages have the authority to interpret. Now, actually, there is another phrase that we can look at for that, because there is something that it says, go to the rabbis of your age when you don't know how to solve a problem. They're going to help you figure out what the problem is. Follow their words. We're going to look at that actually in a second, and they say follow their words to the left or to the right. And what we're going to see about that phrase is something like it says, even if they say that their left is their right, or even if they say their right is left. But we're going to put that off for a second. But so Reuben's saying, it turns out the sages have interpreted this verse to give themselves the authority to interpret verses. So it's so interesting that we have a bat kol that says something. We have two explanations of what it means, right? Rabbi Yirmiyah says what it means, what it all means. And in those in the explanation of what it means, we have an interpretation of what Lo Bashamayim is out of context. And then we have the words Acharei Rabim Lintot, after the majority incline, also taken out of context and used to justify kind of the standard legal procedures the rabbis are going to use, kind of pushing God away. So it turns out that the sages have interpreted this verse to give themselves absolute authority to interpret verses. And God doesn't say, sorry, you took this all out of context. Like, if God talked once as a bat kol to say Rabbi Eliezer is always right, and we basically use two things that basically we know, if we look at the context of the verses, actually isn't a really 100% true kind of sense of what that actually verse means in its context, the bat kol isn't coming back and saying, sorry guys, you actually got it wrong. What it actually, in contrast, is the bat kol doing? The bat kol connected with God is smiling and saying, my children have defeated me. My children have defeated. By the way, as a parent, if you were a parent, when do your parents say those words? My children have defeated me. My children have defeated me, in a smiling way. I think of kind of like a chess match or a tennis match. That like the first time that Yona beat me in chess, right? I'm probably like kind of sad, but I'm also really, really happy. And I'm almost saying like my child has defeated me, but I'm smiling as well. Like, yes, my child has defeated me. Like, he has gone beyond me in a sense, but in a sense that my child has defeated me actually also respects me in some way as well. So the last piece here is what happens next. And what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to read this play, and I'm going to place it here. I'm going to go slow so you can kind of stop the video and read the play, because on your quiz, I'm going to ask you the following question: that what does this part of the story that we're reading next, which comes at the end, add to the entire piece that we've been talking about? And of course, how does it kind of help kind of bring this into an understanding of why the Tanur Shel Achnai piece was found right after a Mishnah connected to Ona'ah bidvarim, like deception regarding words, or words that are harsh. And so I'm going to go through it really quickly. I'm not going to read it, but I'm going to put it on the screen here for you. Oh, the last words of here are, it seems to me that your colleagues are keeping separate from you. So Eliezer ben Atrai took off his shoes, he removed his seat, and he sat on the floor. Next verse. Actually, I'm going to do this a little bit differently, because I don't think you can actually see these. I think let's try that again. Move them up a little bit. Okay, so here's the first one. All right, and that's it.